Sally is with us today, and if you're thinking of going to New Zealand, making the most of the travel bubble, you might want to know where to go that's a little bit out of the way, a little bit different, so there won't be Aussies there. Avoid the Aussies in New Zealand. We'll also go to another island, heading east a little bit, and that will be Norfolk Island. And to NURFM, we're talking travel. Sally Lucas, always a delight to go to parts of the world, and of course there's plenty of good parts of the world near us at the moment.
There is, and I know we've got a little short block out at the moment with New Zealand, but let's hope it's still only going to be the 48 hours. But so we're still thinking of New Zealand as well as within our own country. And there was just a little article recently in one of the travel supplements saying how we can dodge the Aussies in New Zealand. And I thought that was quite an interesting article. And it's mainly saying to explore destinations in New Zealand that aren't always on the regular tourist maps or trails. So I just thought we'd talk about one of them today, and it's the Great Barrier Island, which is in the Hauraki Gulf, and it was called that, it was named that by Captain Cook. Its proper name is Aotea, and it was the barrier between the ocean, the wild ocean, if you like, and the harbour. So they considered that it's a very important island because it does stop a lot of the bad weather coming down into the Hauraki Gulf. And it's the sixth.
That's where Auckland is.
Yes, it is. Yeah, so it's
Gulf.
the major city of the North Island. It's about a 4.5-hour ferry ride or a 30-minute flight to get there. And they work completely off the grid there. Everything's a solar or whatever, everything's produced. It's all very natural. A small population of just under 1,000 people. As I said, it's the sixth largest island in New Zealand as well. So yes, and it's the only island that's been given the that lovely Great Dark Sky title, because they get out there, they've got, like Lord Howe, sounds very similar to me in some respects. There's no street lights, it's mountainous, you've got lots of lovely walks you can do. People go there for the walks, the kayaking, the fishing, the surfing, and of course you've got this wonderful night sky. So you've got that as well.
It sounds as though you have to take your torch, though.
You do. They do recommend you take your torch. You can hire a car, but there are shuttle and transfer companies throughout the island. You rent a car or van. You can rent an electric motorbike as well. You can pre-book your transport, of course. You've got anything from tent sites to luxury eco lodges. More than 60% of the island's 285 square kilometres is public land. So it's got the native forest, it's got natural hot springs, a historic dam called the Kauri Dam, and it's also got several unique and bird species. It rises about 627 metres above the sea. And here, I'm probably not going to have the correct Maori pronunciation for this, but Hirakimata, or Mount Hobson, says it beckons the hiker with the promise of incredible 360-degree views. So it's very much an artisan community. It's got a gin distillery, and I believe a vineyard, I think, as well, and a lot of artists on the island as well, and people producing natural things, and they live as a very sustainable community. So it would be something really lovely to do if you're going to New Zealand that's, a little bit off the tourist trail.
And probably easy to get to from Auckland.
Yes, well, they run regular services, as I said, 4.5-hour ferries from Auckland or a 30-minute flight. So that's the way you can get there. So New Zealand is still on our agenda. We've just got this little hiccup at the moment, which I'm sure we'll get over fairly quickly, but there are lots of other places in New Zealand, of course, other than the Great Barrier Island, where you could step off the tourist trail a little bit and do something different.
We might explore some of those in future weeks.
Yeah, we will. I've got a little pocket full of them that we can have a look at.
We are talking travel with Sally Lucas today, and Norfolk Island, it's about as far as we can possibly go from Australia at the moment, isn't it?
Well, yes, we could think of it as an overseas destination, couldn't we?
Well, you have to go overseas to get there.
You certainly do.
As you do to Carrington.
Hadn't thought of it like that way, Jane, but yes, you do. And Lord Howe and Tasmania, and yes, there are quite a few. Kangaroo Island, we could go on.
Let's go to Norfolk
But we won't. One thing you should see there, Jane, which is quite exceptional, is the Norfolk Cyclorama. And it's a wonderful story that it's a 360-degree painting. It's a beautifully done painting, and of course it's in this round circular building, of course, and it really does bring to life the whole history of Norfolk Island from its beginnings when Queen Victoria let the mutineer descendants leave Pitcairn Island because I think there was not enough food or something for them there anymore, and they were then come on over to Norfolk Island. So you've got a lot of history on Norfolk too, don't forget, a lot of history. And, of course, you've got... it's a wonderful island in the cows. We've talked about this before, how cows have, right of way, and they just roam over the whole island. And the island is just so lush and green. It's a pretty island. It's a beautiful island.
And lots of Norfolk Island pines.
Of course, there are indeed. So you've got lots of historical sites there with, of course, the UNESCO World Heritage Convict Site. And really, it's amazing. I mean, it'd probably rival, Tasmania, I suppose, with Port Arthur, but it's relatively intact, a lot of it, and you can do some wonderful tours there. And they've got the 1829 Georgian mansion there, opens to the public and visitors on select days. So make sure you check all these things when you get there, because sometimes these houses and museums aren't open daily. And if you're going there for that purpose, to establish and contact the history of the place, you really need to make sure that you check that before you go so that you're there on the right days. And unlike Lord Howe, it's a little bit different to Lord Howe. It's bigger than Lord Howe, of course, and you don't have a lot of luxury accommodation on the island, but you've still got a wide range of all sorts of accommodation on the island. There's one luxury house there now, I think, called King Tide House, but there's still some nice 3-4 star accommodation as well as the more basic. And also, if you're interested in Colleen McCulloch, of course, the famous author of the original Thornbirds, etc., she spent nearly 4 decades on Norfolk Island, and her property now called Out Yenna is open to the public as well. Again, I don't think that's daily either, so just keep that in mind. But everything's been left as it was on her death in 2015, and lots of artefacts. She had an eccentric collection of priceless artworks and all sorts of things there, so that's worthwhile going to as well. You need a car, but you will find with most of the accommodation packages, they do provide a car as part of the deal. You get a car rental for the 7 days if you're there for 7 days, and usually they throw in a couple of half-day things as well. It might be an evening tour, or it might be a museum admission. So really, Norfolk, it's quite good like that they provide quite a lot of inclusions when you do book a holiday to Norfolk Island as well. There's also a cheesemaker on the island at the Hilly Goat Farm, which I've been to, and Hilly is an island word meaning lazy or lethargic.
Oh.
So it's HILLI, and it's an artisan goats farm, and they also do a house cheese there as well, and they have you eat on the veranda of the homestead there, which is really the most beautiful views, and whatever's fresh produce directly from the farm or the ocean is what you get. So one more thing too, flights to Norfolk were operated originally by Air New Zealand, but are now operated by Qantas on selected weekdays from Sydney and Brisbane. They do prefer you to have a passport, and you've also got to complete Norfolk Island's COVID-19 essentials before you arrive. You can get, if you don't have a passport though, you can get a Norfolk Island sort of document of identity situation if you're a person that doesn't hold a passport or doesn't wish to get another passport.
So would you get that from Australia?
Yes, you get that here before you go again.
Okay, so
yes.
Again, it's from Department of Immigration
yes.
or whoever.
Yes, if you go
deals
onto a
with
Norfolk
things.
Island website, you'll find, or Norfolk Island Tourism, you'll get the links there as to what you have to do.
2NURFM, we're talking travel. Sally Lucas, time to look at what's in the hot deals department at the moment in the travel.
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of things coming out of the Pandora's box lately, Jane. We're getting some really interesting offers, and one of the companies that normally operated overseas into Africa is operating, obviously, tours now within Australia. And one of the ones I looked through, and I could have talked, and I can continue again, I can add it to my little pocket again, but there's a whole range of interesting tours they're doing. And this one I thought was particularly interesting because everyone who's been doing a self-drive holiday keeps posting photos of these wonderful silos that have been painted, and it's really remarkable when you look at them and the actual quality of the artwork on these silos. But like one of them, for example, and I was reading here that the Barraba silo committee or something, whatever you want to call it, they actually got proposals in from artists. So there was 25, 14 were received, and then they narrowed it down as to who should paint. The silo that was Dorothea McKellar from my country, and she's been immortalised on a 29-metre high silo in the maize mill in Gunnedah. So this is visiting 6 different silos throughout New South Wales, and you're going to Merriwa, Tamworth, of course, Dunedoo, Dubbo. You do the zoo there. You go to parks. You go to the Elvis Museum. There's heaps of inclusions. Parks, Grenfell, Bathurst. You pop into the Blue Mountains on the way back into Sydney. A lot of meals are included. Just about everything. It's just a 14-passenger, small departure, so it'd be a lovely way of travelling. And you're getting breakfasts every day, and you're getting some lunches and some dinners. So there's not many extra meals to pay for, and that starts from under $3,000 per person. They're also doing another one to Litchfield. That was 6 days. Sorry, I don't know whether I said that. This is a 7-day Darwin back to Darwin. If you're interested in doing that, of course, a lot of people don't like hiring cars because, number one, at the moment they're fairly expensive because there's not a plethora of them around. They haven't sort of increased their fleet due to COVID, so they are hard to obtain sometimes. But also, you're missing out on the history. Whereas you go on a small group tour, you're going to get all that knowledge and all that history and just still be only with a small amount of people, not a large tour group. So I think it's a really good way of doing it. This is doing Darwin, Litchfield, Kakadu National Park. Of course, you go onto Yellow Waters and do the cruise there, and you get down into Catherine Gorge as well. As we all know, that's just a beautiful part of the world. So that's in September this year, 7 days escorted, again with massive inclusions in it as well. And it's also around that $3,000 mark as well. But while we're talking NZ, Jane, and I'll have to go and talk further about this as well, but Wild Earth Travel are introducing cycling tours to some of the most magnificent regions of the New Zealand South Island. Some really interesting itineraries they're doing through the south. So anyone's into their bikes, there's multiple departures year-round out of Christchurch, doing the Mackenzie Country, Lake Tekapo, Lake Pukaki, the Waitaki Valley, vineyards, the historic port town of Oamaru. Another one's doing Queenstown and the Otago Central Trail as well, which is wonderful. Another one's doing the trails of the early gold rush miners throughout the west, the rugged west coast of New Zealand. That might be a hard one, I think, on a bike. And there's another one, of course, called Cycle the Alps to the Ocean. And, of course, you're doing the Otago Trail and the West Coast Wind Trail as well, going to Otago wineries, Lake Matheson, Oamaru again, Mount Cook. Look, it just looks fantastic. So there's a range of departures on those for cycling tours. And within Australia, South Australia touring, there's some lovely tours at the moment too, doing Wilpena Pound and Coober Pedy, a 5-day, 4-night tour out of Adelaide, which is lovely. And they're also including a 2-night stay in Coober Pedy and a Lake Eyre scenic flight over Lake Eyre as well, in the hope that the water will be down by then. And they've got reductions on these at the moment of $600 per couple. And there's another one that does Wilpena Pound, Coober Pedy and Uluru. It's a 7-day trip as well. And again, you're doing that wonderful Katajuta, of course, as well in Uluru. So these are some lovely itineraries, but there's a lot more coming out at the moment. And there's a lot coming out by private jet. If people haven't got the time or they're not into the extended touring, but they want to visit the sites, you can do Queensland and Outback Tropics by private jet. Fantastic. They've got a range of dates. It's a 9-day itinerary from June through to September this year, and you're going from Sydney to Longreach to Winton, Mount Isa, Thursday Island, Horn Island, Cape York, Cairns, Port Douglas, Hamilton Island, back to Sydney, all by private jet.
Far-reaching.
So, and it's no more expensive than if you were to do what might have been doing an overseas trip. So instead of that, you're doing something wonderful in our own country. But there's a whole range of those that we can talk further about in the distant future as well. There's quite a lot coming up, Jane. So nothing short in our back pocket to look for. We've got plenty at the moment.
Thank you, Sally Lucas.
Thank you, Jane.
We'll talk travel again next Friday after the 1 o'clock news on 2NURFM.